Captain Gideon Merrick tightened his grip on the control panel, staring at the blinking red lights. The Erebus floated silently in the dark expanse of Titan's orbit, a small human freighter surrounded by endless black. What should have been a routine inspection had turned into a nightmare. The propulsion core was unstable. Sensors flagged it as a minor fault at first, but the readings were spreading, echoing through the ship like a heartbeat gone wrong. Gideon's chest tightened. He had seen ship failures before, but never under these conditions. The colonies depended on freighters like his. Supplies, water, oxygen, medicine, they all came through ships like the Erebus. If the engines failed mid-transit, the colonies would starve, and the humans who had fought so long to survive on Titan and Saturn's moons would lose everything. Core anomaly rising, muttered Talia Voss from across the bridge. Her fingers flew over a holographic console. She was young, sharp, and brilliant, a tactical AI programmer who had survived more crises in her short career than most humans did in a lifetime. It's not just a fault. Something else is affecting the grid. Gideon's jaw tightened. Explain. Talia's eyes flicked up from the data stream. I don't know how yet, but it's external. Someone, or something, is interfering with our systems. The pattern isn't natural. It looks deliberate. Deliberate. The word hit Gideon harder than the flashing alarms. Humans were not alone in space. Earth had warned the colonies about rogue alien factions, but the Vishari were supposed to stay at the edge of explored space. They were merciless, precise, and efficient. If they were here, Titan's orbit was already a trap. Prep emergency protocols, Gideon said, voice steady even as tension coiled in his chest. Shut down non-essential systems, isolate the core, and get the engines stable. We have no time for mistakes. The crew moved like a well-oiled machine. Every second mattered. Engineers crawled into maintenance shafts, adjusting conduits and power regulators. Talia worked tirelessly at the AI interface, rerouting auxiliary power to stabilize sensors while running simulations to predict the core's behavior. Sweat glimmered on her forehead, and her voice never wavered. Captain, she said suddenly, this isn't just about the ship. The interference is spreading across the colony's network. If we don't stop it, Titan's energy nodes will fail. All life support, communication, even defense turrets, they could go offline. Gideon froze for a fraction of a second. The colony's defenses were minimal. The freighters were meant for trade, transport, repairs, not war. If the Vishari attacked the nodes, the colonists would have no chance. No chance but one. He gritted his teeth. Then we make our chance count. We fight even if the odds are impossible. The words felt heavier than he expected. He wasn't commanding a fleet of warships. He had only the Erebus, a handful of engineers, and a crew who had never been in combat. But that was enough. Human ingenuity thrived in impossible situations. Humans thrived when others said survival was hopeless. The first shockwave hit without warning. Sensors screamed. Power flickered across the bridge, dimming lights and sending sparks onto the floor. Gideon caught one of them before it fell, feeling the sting against his skin. Talia cursed under her breath, eyes wide as the AI struggled to maintain core stability. Damage to the aft conduit, shouted one engineer. We're losing pressure in the secondary reactor. Reroute everything to the main core. Gideon barked. If we stabilize this, we still have a chance to warn the colony. If we fail, Titan goes dark and we go with it. Hands moved faster than thought. Pipes hissed, lights flickered, and the ship groaned under the strain. Every human on the bridge knew they were dancing on the edge of destruction. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the freighter would explode like a dying star. Yet, in that chaos, determination burned brighter than fear. Talia's fingers flew over the console. Captain, it's spreading faster than predicted. The interference isn't random. Someone's targeting the grid. Whoever it is, they know exactly what to hit. Gideon swallowed hard. He understood the stakes now. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a malfunction. It was a message. The Vishari were here to show humans they were weak, expendable. But he refused to give them the satisfaction. Prepare the auxiliary thrusters, he ordered. We might need to move fast. If we can't stabilize the core, we have to buy time, buy the colony time. Everyone hold your ground. This is our fight, whether we wanted it or not. The crew nodded, faces tight with tension and fear. Yet Gideon saw something else in their eyes, courage. The raw, unyielding courage that had defined humanity from the first step on Earth to the first step on Mars. Humans might be small in the galaxy, their ships fragile, their numbers few. But in moments like this, they became unstoppable. A sudden alarm blared louder than before. The ship shuddered violently, throwing Gideon against the console. Sparks rained from the overhead panels. A massive energy spike surged through the core, and for a heartbeat, everything went black. Gideon gritted his teeth and pushed himself upright. The bridge lights flickered back. The crew held their positions, breaths ragged. Outside, the silent void of space waited, indifferent. And in the distance, sensors finally picked up the telltale signature. Massive alien ships, sleek and deadly, emerging from the shadows of Titan's orbit. Gideon swallowed hard. He had one chance. One small freighter, one small crew, and a colony depending on them. The human spark was about to be tested against an impossible enemy. And in that moment, Gideon knew. A simple repair had just become humanity's last stand. The Erebus shuddered as the alien ships closed in, their dark hulls gleaming with strange energy. On the bridge, Gideon Merrick's jaw was tight, but his mind raced. The freighter was small, slow, and unarmed. Against the Vishari, it was nothing but a target. Yet nothing human had ever survived by doing nothing. "Captain," Talia Voss said, eyes scanning her console, "their formation, it's not random. They're probing us. Testing the colony's defenses. If they find a weak point, Titan falls in minutes." Gideon's fingers drummed on the console. "We have to turn a weakness into strength. Every second counts." "Ideas?" Talia hesitated, then spoke fast. "We can't fight them head-on. Not with this ship. But we can use the freighter itself, as a lure. If we overload the core just enough, we could create a massive energy signature. They'll target it, and that gives the colony time to prepare." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "Overload the core? That's suicidal." Talia shrugged. "It's the only chance. We buy time, we warn the colonies, and maybe, we cripple their sensors long enough to escape. But it has to be precise." He studied her for a moment. Humans often thrived where machines hesitated. Logic alone wouldn't save them. Courage and quick thinking would. "Do it. I'll stay here with the core. Everyone else gets to safety." The crew exchanged nervous glances. Some were engineers, some pilots, none trained for real combat. Yet in their fear, determination shone. Humans did what they must, even when the odds were against them. In the engine room, Gideon and Talia worked side by side. Sparks flew as conduits were rerouted and power regulators adjusted. The freighter groaned under the strain, the vibrations shaking the walls. Every adjustment had to be exact. Too little and the Vishari wouldn't take the bait. Too much and the ship would tear itself apart. One engineer, a young man named Joran, looked pale. "Captain, I don't know if I can handle another spike. The hull's already stressed." Gideon clapped him on the shoulder. "You don't get a choice. We're doing this together. Humanity survives because we try when no one else would. Now move." The crew worked in tense silence, punctuated by the hum of machinery and the occasional alarm. Outside the reinforced viewport, the Vishari ships glinted in the faint light of Saturn. Their movements were precise, almost clinical, as if they could read every human thought. Gideon's stomach tightened. They were predators and he was bait. Talia's fingers flew over her console. "Energy signature ready. We can trigger it in 30 seconds. Gideon swallowed hard. 30 seconds to gamble the lives of everyone aboard and possibly the colony itself. But fear was useless. Humans thrived under pressure. Humans turned impossible odds into survival. He nodded once. "Do it." The moment the overload began, the Erebus vibrated violently. Lights flickered, alarms screamed, and the hull groaned under the strain. Gideon gritted his teeth, guiding the ship manually while Talia monitored the external energy dispersal. Every second felt like an hour. Then the Vishari reacted. Their ships shifted, converging on the freighter's glowing core. Energy pulses shot outward, signaling the aliens to attack. Gideon could almost hear their predatory calculation. He felt a mix of terror and awe. These were superior beings, but humans had something aliens never could: ingenuity under fire, courage that refused to bend, and hearts willing to risk everything for others. "Captain," one of the engineers shouted. "Secondary conduits failing. If it blows, we're toast." Gideon slammed a hand against the panel. "Hold it. Stabilize with auxiliary lines. We're not dead yet." Minutes, or maybe hours, passed in the blur of alarms and flashing lights. The Vishari ships closed, fired pulses of energy, and attempted to disable the freighter's shields. Sparks flew across the bridge, panels smoked, and yet Gideon and his crew held their ground. They adapted, rerouted power, and found creative solutions in moments that demanded perfection. Finally the trap was set. The Erebus glowed with an almost blinding light, the energy spike magnified by the ship's unstable core. The Vishari ships accelerated toward the signature. Sensors confirmed, they had taken the bait. Gideon exhaled sharply. The first step was done. The freighter would draw the aliens away from Titan long enough for the colony to reinforce defenses. But the gamble wasn't over. The core hummed dangerously, threatening to tear the ship apart. Every human on board felt the tension like a physical weight. Talia glanced at him, voice tight. The colony's tracking our signal. They're mobilizing defenses. We've bought some time, but it won't last long. Gideon nodded, sweat dripping down his temple. Good. Time is all we need. Now, let's see if humans can turn this last stand into victory. A sudden jolt shook the Erebus. The lights dimmed. The hum of the core grew into a roar. Gideon's stomach sank. Something had hit them. An alien pulse struck the freighter's shields, far stronger than anticipated. Panels blew free, throwing wires across the deck. One crew member screamed as sparks rained down. Gideon steadied himself. Damage report. Secondary shields down. Forward thrusters unstable. We can't maintain course. He clenched his fists. No. Humans did not give up. Not now. Not ever. They adapted. They fought. They survived when all hope seemed lost. Then we improvise, Gideon said through gritted teeth. We adapt, we survive, and we make them pay attention. Full manual override, forward thrusters only. Brace for course shift. As the crew scrambled, the freighter lurched, diving toward the Vishari ships like a stone in a river. The glow of the overloaded core lit their faces, highlighting fear, determination, and the spark of human courage. In that instant, Gideon understood something deeply simple. Humans did not wait for luck. Humans created it. And as Titan's orbit trembled under the approaching threat, Gideon knew the fight was only beginning. The simple repair that started it all had already become humanity's first move in a war they could not afford to lose. The Erebus shuddered violently, its hull straining under the weight of the overloaded core. Sparks rained across the deck, and alarms screamed in a relentless chorus. Gideon Merrick gritted his teeth, gripping the control panel as the ship lurched toward the Vishari fleet. The freighter was a beacon now, pulsing with energy that no human had ever imagined weaponizing. Every second was a gamble. One misstep, and the freighter, the crew, and Titan's colony would all be annihilated. Captain, Talia Voss shouted above the alarms, they're targeting the core directly. Shields can't hold another hit. Gideon's jaw tightened. He had a choice: maintain course and risk complete destruction, or act on instinct. Humans thrived on impossible choices. Fear could not dictate action. Courage, cleverness, and a refusal to yield, that was the human way. Divert auxiliary thrusters to port. Gideon barked. I'm taking manual control of the energy conduits. Talia, prep the emergency discharge. When I give the signal, push it to the Vishari ships. Talia's fingers flew over her console, rerouting power, monitoring core integrity, and calculating outcomes faster than anyone could imagine. Sparks flew across the floor. An engineer ducked as a panel burst into flames. Joran, his face pale but steady, worked frantically to maintain pressure lines. Every human aboard had a single, impossible task. Yet each moved with precision, ingenuity, and determination. The first pulse from the Vishari ships hit the freighter. The hull groaned under the impact. Panels rattled, and a section of the bridge floor warped from the heat of the energy blast. Gideon staggered but held his position. His eyes scanned the viewport, tracking the alien vessels as they surged forward. These were machines designed to kill, but humans had something no alien program could replicate: the capacity to think unpredictably in real time. Captain, Talia said, voice tight, the discharge window is open. If we time this correctly, we can cripple their sensors long enough to escape, and by Titan's colonies more than just minutes. Gideon exhaled slowly. This was it, the moment to turn desperation into action. Do it, he said. The emergency discharge roared to life. Energy arced along conduits, jumping in jagged, brilliant lines across the deck. The Erebus vibrated violently as the core pulsed, brighter and hotter than it had ever been. The Vishari ships reacted instantly, their targeting systems overwhelmed by the artificial overload. Pulses of energy flickered, shields wavered, and sensors blinked out in confusion. For a brief moment, the Erebus was untouchable, a fragile, blazing human spark against a dark, calculating enemy. Gideon felt a surge of adrenaline. Forward thrusters, full power. Brace for evasive maneuvers. The freighter leapt like a wounded bird, swerving through space with a grace that defied its size and damage. The Vishari pursued, but their sensors were compromised. They could not predict the freighter's sudden movements. Humans adapted, reacted, and improvised. Every twist, every turn, was calculated on instinct and courage. From the viewport, Gideon saw the first real sign of success. One of the Vishari ships, overconfident and miscalculating, collided with the edge of Titan's orbital debris field. Explosions erupted across its hull, sending it spinning into a cascade of fragments. Another ship faltered, shields flickering as it scrambled to re-establish sensor links. Humans had carved chaos from precision and courage. Yet the danger was far from over. The overloaded core still pulsed, threatening to tear the Erebus apart from within. Sparks shot from every panel, wires hissed and snapped, and the bridge shook with each thrum of energy. Talia's eyes were wide, but she did not falter. "Captain, the core's unstable. If it goes critical now, it'll take the freighter, and us, with it." Gideon's lips pressed into a thin line. There was no time to fear. He gripped the manual controls, redirecting energy from damaged conduits, balancing the overload just enough to maintain control. Every adjustment required perfect timing. A single mistake, a fraction of a second too early or too late, and everything would end in fire. He glanced at his crew. Every face was set with determination. Fear was present, yes, but it was not paralyzing. Humans never surrendered to fear. Humans adapted. Humans fought, and when survival demanded it, humans invented solutions out of desperation. The Vishari fleet regrouped, moving in tighter. Gideon recognized the danger. They had not expected human ingenuity. They had underestimated the determination that ran through the veins of every human aboard the freighter. They would correct their mistake, but it would take time. That window was all Gideon needed. "Prepare the secondary discharge," he said. "This is our last chance to break their formation. Timing is everything." Talia nodded, hands flying over the controls. The energy arced again, pulsing outward in controlled bursts. The freighter glowed like a dying star, a beacon of human courage, intelligence, and sheer stubbornness. The Vishari ships faltered, their formation fracturing as their sensors failed again. One by one they fell into the trap Gideon had set, drawn by the blinding energy signature. The Erebus shuddered violently. The overload was pushing the ship to its limit. Sparks danced across the walls and the deck vibrated underfoot. Gideon gritted his teeth and adjusted the manual controls again, inching the freighter closer to the heart of the alien fleet. Humans were small and fragile, but brilliance and courage could turn even the tiniest spark into fire that could change the course of a battle. And then, through the viewport, Gideon saw it, a massive Vishari cruiser, its hull bristling with weapons, moving straight into the trap. The pulse from the freighter hit the cruiser like a thunderbolt. Sensors fried. Shields faltered. The ship lurched, and Gideon knew this was the moment that could shift everything. He swallowed hard. The freighter was battered. The core might not survive another pulse. But humans had turned desperation into opportunity. And in that instant, Gideon realized, what began as a simple repair had become a weapon of hope, a demonstration of what humans could do when pushed to the edge. Outside, Titan's colonies stirred. Systems flickered back online. The first messages of warning reached the planetary grids. Humanity had survived the first strike, but the real test was only beginning. Gideon's eyes narrowed. The Vishari were powerful, cunning, and ruthless. But humans were dangerous in ways the aliens could never anticipate. They adapted. They endured. They fought. And now, with the Erebus blazing at the heart of the enemy fleet, Gideon knew one thing for certain. The humans were far from done. The freighter trembled violently as the Erebus surged into the heart of the Vishari fleet. Sparks flew across the bridge, alarms blaring like a chorus of impending doom. Gideon Merrick's hands gripped the manual controls so tightly his knuckles whitened. Every nerve in his body screamed that the ship could break apart at any moment, but fear was useless. Humans survived because they acted when others froze. Humans won by thinking, by daring, by refusing to quit. "Captain," Talia Voss shouted, voice tight with urgency, "the cruiser ahead is the flagship. If we can take it out, the rest of the fleet will falter." Gideon's heart pounded. The Vishari flagship was massive, bristling with weapons, a war machine built to crush human colonies with cold precision. Yet it was here because humans had baited it. Because humans had gambled everything. "Target its sensors," Gideon said, voice calm despite the chaos. "Full discharge on my mark. Everyone brace." The crew tightened their grips. Engineers monitored the conduits, rerouting energy to maintain core stability while Talia ran rapid calculations to optimize the discharge. Sparks shot across the floor as panels glowed red-hot, and one of the engineers ducked as a loose wire ignited. Every human aboard was at the peak of focus, operating in perfect unison. The flagship surged forward, its energy pulses striking shields that barely held. Gideon knew that if even one pulse breached, the Erebus would be shredded. He swallowed hard. Humans thrived in the impossible because they refused to see odds as fate. Now, Gideon barked. The freighter's overloaded core pulsed violently. Energy arced outward in jagged bolts, striking the flagship's sensors. Sparks danced across its hull. Systems blinked, faltered, and failed. The alien ship shuddered violently, unable to recalibrate fast enough. Other Vishari vessels hesitated, disrupted by the sudden chaos. Direct hit. Talia shouted, relief flashing in her eyes. Sensors are down. They can't target us properly. Gideon didn't relax. One advantage could vanish in a heartbeat. He guided the Erebus with delicate precision, dodging plasma pulses, ramming the freighter toward the crippled flagship. Sparks and heat washed over the bridge as the core neared critical. Hold steady, he murmured. We finished this. From the viewport, the crew watched the alien flagship struggle to stabilize. Its weapons flickered erratically. Gideon saw their opening. He gave a precise command, prepare manual override. Secondary discharge, direct at the reactor. Talia nodded, sweat streaking her face. Every keystroke, every calculation mattered. One wrong move, one misjudged second, and the freighter would explode. Yet every human aboard moved with clarity born from desperation and determination. Humans thrived because they could act where others hesitated. The Erebus shuddered violently as the secondary discharge surged through the conduit network. Energy shot outward in a controlled blast, striking the flagship's reactor with surgical precision. There was a blinding flash. Sparks cascaded across the viewport. The alien ship's hull buckled. Weapons failed. Shields collapsed. The flagship spun uncontrollably, slamming into a nearby debris field with an ear-splitting crash. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the rest of the Vishari fleet faltered. Without their flagship's guidance, they scattered in confusion, uncoordinated and vulnerable. Humans, small and fragile, had turned the tide with cleverness, courage, and audacity. Gideon exhaled, voice shaking slightly. They're breaking formation. Keep pressure on them. Don't let them recover. The crew cheered, though briefly, as the Erebus continued its maneuvers. Every pulse, every calculation was perfect. The remaining Vishari ships, disoriented and damaged, were pushed back by Titan's orbital defenses, which had finally come online. Humans had bought time and they had used it with deadly efficiency. Yet the freighter was battered. Sparks flew from exposed conduits, the hull was scarred with holes, and the core glowed dangerously red. Talia glanced at Gideon, worry etched in every line of her face. Captain, if we take another hit, the core will go critical. We have one chance to finish this. Gideon nodded. Humans thrived not by retreating in fear, but by facing impossible odds head-on. Full discharge into the remaining fleet. Target their command systems. It ends now, or we go down trying. The freighter surged forward. Energy arced from every panel, every conduit, lightning lashing across space. Alien ships faltered, sensors fried, engines overloaded. Sparks illuminated the crew's determined faces. Every human aboard acted with a unity born of courage and necessity. And then, in a brilliant flash, the remaining Vishari ships erupted in a cascade of explosions. Plasma and debris scattered across space. Titan's orbit was clear. The colonies were safe, for now. The humans had triumphed not because of firepower, but because they had thought, risked, and dared when others might have surrendered. Gideon slumped against the control panel, exhausted but unbroken. Around him, the crew cheered quietly, relief mingling with awe. They had faced a superior enemy, turned a simple repair into a weapon, and survived. They had shown what humans could do when cornered. Talia placed a hand on his shoulder, voice trembling. We did it, we actually did it. Gideon's eyes swept across the viewport at the scattered wreckage of the Vishari fleet. We didn't just survive. We proved that humans fight back. Humans don't surrender. And we never will. Outside, Titan's colonies began to stabilize. Systems came online. Warnings and communications flickered back to life. Humanity had survived another night in the void. Humanity had turned a desperate gamble into victory. And in that moment, Gideon knew the freighter was more than a ship. It was a symbol of what humans could do, small, fragile, yet brilliant and unyielding. Against impossible odds, humans had fought. Against impossible odds, humans had won. The freighter, battered and glowing, floated in the debris of the alien fleet. It was damaged, yes, but unbroken. So were its crew. And so was humanity. The debris of the Vishari fleet drifted silently in Titan's orbit. The Erebus floated among it, battered, smoking and scarred from the battle but still intact. Captain Gideon Merrick slumped against the console, muscles aching, sweat dripping into his eyes. Around him, the crew exhaled in quiet relief, exhausted but alive. For a moment they allowed themselves to feel it, victory, fragile but real. Talia Voss wiped soot from her face, eyes bright with relief. We actually pulled it off, she whispered. The colonies, they're safe. Gideon nodded slowly. For now. But it's more than that. They'll remember what humans can do. He gestured to the viewport, where Titan's surface shimmered under the glow of orbital lights. Even when we're small, even when the odds are stacked against us, humans adapt, we endure and we fight. The crew looked around at one another, faces marked with fatigue, soot, and determination. Some had never imagined they would survive a real battle. Some had lost friends along the way. Yet each felt the same fierce pride. They had faced an impossible enemy and emerged victorious. They had turned a simple repair, meant only to stabilize a freighter, into the first strike of humanity's stand. Gideon's gaze settled on the damaged hull of the Erebus. Sparks flickered from panels that would soon need full replacement. The freighter had carried them to the edge of annihilation and back. In a way, it symbolized humanity itself, fragile, imperfect, but capable of brilliance beyond expectation. Talia leaned over the console, speaking softly but firmly. Captain, the colony defenses have gone online. Power grids stabilized, communication restored. Earth is sending reinforcements, and the remaining Vishari vessels are retreating. Titan is safe for now. Gideon allowed himself a small, tight smile. Then it's enough. We survived and we've bought the colony's time. That's what counts. He paused, voice quieter now. Time is all humans need to turn survival into hope, and hope into victory. One of the engineers, Joran, stepped forward. He was shaking slightly, exhaustion written into every movement. Captain, you risked everything. You stayed aboard the freighter, controlled the core, made the final discharge yourself. You saved us. Gideon's eyes softened. No, we saved ourselves. Every one of you acted with courage, with brains and determination. That's humanity, never giving up, even when it seems impossible. He met each of their eyes. You did more than survive. You inspired. The crew absorbed his words, realizing that their actions had become something greater than individual survival. They had shown that human courage could turn the tide of war, that intelligence and morality could overcome brute force, that the smallest spark of ingenuity could illuminate the darkest void. Outside, Titan's orbit shimmered with renewed life. Signals blinked across the planetary surface. Warnings, status reports, emergency power rerouted. The colonies began to recover, humanity's network of settlements resilient despite years of vulnerability. And through it all, the Erebus remained a symbol, a battered, glowing monument to human perseverance and courage. Gideon walked to the viewport, tracing the line of retreating Vishari ships. The enemy would regroup. They were cunning, ruthless, and persistent. But humans were harder to predict. Humans learned, humans adapted, and humans remembered every lesson learned in fire. Humanity had survived tonight not because of luck, but because of courage, ingenuity, and a refusal to surrender. Talia joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Do you think they'll come back? She asked quietly. Gideon's jaw set. Maybe. But they'll never underestimate humans again. They'll remember Titan, they'll remember the Erebus, and they'll remember the crew who turned a simple repair into a human victory. And if they come back, we'll be ready. A low hum ran through the freighter as emergency systems stabilized. Gideon allowed himself a deep breath, savoring the moment before the next challenge. Humans had faced impossible odds and turned them into opportunity. They had turned fear into courage, desperation into action, and a fragile ship into a weapon of hope. He glanced at the crew one last time. Exhaustion, relief, pride, all written clearly on their faces. Every one of them had contributed, every action had mattered. That was the essence of humanity: collective strength, individual ingenuity, moral courage. A single spark could ignite a blaze. Let's get home, Gideon said quietly. Titan is safe, the colonies will rebuild, and humans endure. That's who we are. Outside the viewport, Saturn's rings glimmered in the distant light of the sun. Humanity's colonies, small dots of life in the vast darkness, were alive and thriving. The Vishari fleet was gone, scattered and crippled, their message of terror shattered by the courage of a single crew aboard a fragile freighter. Gideon's hand rested on the console. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt human, small, flawed, determined, and unyielding. And for the first time that night, he allowed himself a faint smile. Humans had survived. Humans had won. And the story of the Erebus, of the simple repair that became humanity's last stand, would live on, inspiring the colonies for generations to come. Somewhere in the distance, the first signs of a new day broke over Titan. Light spilled across frozen plains and rocky valleys. Humans were alive, humans were strong, and humans had proved again that even against impossible odds, courage, intelligence, and determination could change the universe. The battle was over, but the legend had just begun.